They laughed when a billionaire with only 3 months to live adopted 5 boys from the streets. Little did they know that fate would change everything. Before we begin the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Please subscribe to my channel for more sweet videos like this. Let the story continue. I love knowing where my viewers are from. Let's get into the story. The manila envelope sat unopened on Victor Langston's mahogany desk, casting a long shadow despite its thinness. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office on the 52nd floor, Manhattan sparkled like a jewel box, oblivious to the devastation contained in that simple folder. 3 months, Victor whispered, finally breaking the silence that had engulfed the room since his physician had left. 3 months to live. The words hung in the air, as tangible as the rare artwork adorning his walls. At 58, Victor Langston had built an empire that spanned continents. The Langston Ventures logo crowns buildings in 12 countries. His net worth would make small nations envious, and none of it mattered now. Victor loosened his silk tie and poured himself 3 fingers of 30-year-old scotch. The amber liquid caught the dying sunlight as he raised it to his lips. It tasted like ash. "What legacy am I leaving?" he asked the empty room. His voice, normally commanding in boardrooms, sounded hollow even to his own ears. His wife, Catherine, had succumbed to the same disease 5 years ago. They had never had children, always too busy building the empire, always thinking there would be time later. Now there was no more later. Victor moved to the window, watching the tiny figures scurrying below like ants. How many of them were rushing home to families? How many had someone waiting? The thought sent a wave of loneliness crashing over him. Memories flooded back. His childhood in a cramped apartment in the Bronx, his mother working 3 jobs after his father abandoned them, the scholarship that had been his ticket out, the relentless climb to the top. He had promised himself he would never be vulnerable again, never need anyone again, and he had succeeded brilliantly, terribly. His phone buzzed. Another board meeting, another acquisition, another billion to add to accounts that would soon belong to distant relatives who had never bothered to know him. Victor Langston, master of the universe, was going to die alone. He set down his untouched drink and straightened his tie. The mask of the ruthless businessman slid back into place as he gathered his papers. But something had cracked inside him. Something fundamental. He stepped into the elevator. Victor made a silent vow. His remaining days would mean something. He just didn't know what or how. The elevator doors closed on the empire he had built, and the emptiness it contained. The charity gala had been unbearable. Victor adjusted his bow tie as his driver navigated the late-night streets of Manhattan. His mind kept returning to the diagnosis. 3 months. The sympathetic murmurs and calculating glances from those who'd caught wind of his condition made him feel like a commodity whose stock was plummeting. "Take the next right, Henry," Victor instructed suddenly. The shorter route home. The limousine turned onto a narrower street, its headlights sweeping across storefronts closed for the night. As they approached an alley between 2 buildings, Victor glimpsed movement in the shadows. "Stop the car, Henry." Just for a moment. Against his driver's concerned protests, Victor stepped out into the December chill. The forecast had mentioned snow before morning. He approached the alley cautiously, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the pavement. 5 huddled forms became visible, boys using cardboard and newspapers as blankets. The oldest couldn't be more than 15. The youngest, perhaps 7 or 8. They were awake instantly, alert like prey animals, sensing danger. "Easy," Victor said, raising his hands. "I'm not a policeman." The oldest boy stood protectively in front of the others. "We ain't doing nothing wrong. This is private property, but the owner said we could stay until they start construction." Victor noticed they were organized, their few possessions neatly arranged. There was an intelligence in their eyes that struck him, particularly the oldest and the smallest. "What are your names?" he asked. Silence. Then the oldest spoke again. "I'm Caleb. These are Nathan and Noah." He gestured to the identical boys, around 13. "That's Isaac." A thin 11-year-old with artistic hands. "And Levi, the tiny boy with enormous eyes. Your brothers? Not by blood, Caleb replied. By circumstance. Something stirred in Victor, something he'd thought long dead. An impulse, irrational and powerful, gripped him. It's going to snow tonight, he said. I have a place nearby. Warm beds, hot food. The suspicion in their eyes was immediate. No strings attached, Victor added. Just tonight. It's the Christmas season, after all. The boys conferred in whispers while Victor waited. His driver watched incredulously from the car. Finally, Caleb looked up. One night. We stay together. We leave anytime we want. Agreed. 20 minutes later, Victor Langston, who had never even owned a pet, watched 5 street boys cautiously enter his penthouse. They stood huddled together in the vast living room, looking simultaneously awed and terrified by the luxury surrounding them. The kitchen is stocked, Victor said. Bedroom's down that hall. The bathroom has everything you need. I'll be in my study if you need anything. As he turned to leave, the smallest one, Levi, spoke up. Why are you doing this? Victor paused. It was a question he couldn't answer, not fully. Instead, he simply said, because I can. But as he sat alone in his study later, listening to the muffled sounds of life temporarily filling his empty home, he began formulating a plan so outrageous, even he could scarcely believe he was considering it. Tomorrow, he would call his lawyers. Victor's Manhattan mansion had always been a showcase immaculate, pristine, and utterly lifeless. Now, echoes of young voices bounced off marble floors and designer furniture. This is insane. Malcolm Everett, Victor's attorney of 20 years, muttered as they watched the boys from the study doorway. The 5 children moved like a unit, never straying far from each other. Temporary guardianship is one thing, but adoption, all 5, in your condition? Victor observed how the twins, Nathan and Noah, examined everything with technical curiosity, how Isaac traced the patterns on an antique vase with artist's fingers, how Caleb constantly counted exits and valuables, how little Levi absorbed every detail like a sponge. My condition is precisely why, Malcolm, Victor replied. Processed the paperwork. 3 days in, tensions were high. The boys broke a priceless vase while roughhousing. Victor snapped at them harshly. Caleb responded by organizing a silent treatment that lasted hours. On the 4th night, Victor found Levi attempting to pick the lock to his study. What do you think you're doing? He demanded. The small boy jumped. I wanted to see your books. You could have asked. Levi's eyes narrowed. Adults don't usually say yes to me. The frankness stunned Victor. He unlocked the door. Well, I'm saying yes now. The boy's face lit up as he explored the extensive library. When Victor mentioned it was past bedtime, Levi asked, Can I take one to read? You can read these? Caleb taught us all, Levi said proudly. He says knowledge is better than money for survival. Victor handed him a simplified astronomy book. Start with this one. By the end of the first week, a routine emerged. Chaotic, uncomfortable, but a routine nonetheless. The boys tested boundaries constantly. A scheduled dinner became the flashpoint. I'm not eating this, Isaac declared, pushing away perfectly prepared salmon. You'll eat what's served, Victor said firmly. We didn't ask to come here, Caleb challenged. Yet here you are, in clean clothes with a roof over your head. Silence fell. Then Levi spoke, his voice small. The last time someone gave us food for free, they called the cops when we were sleeping. The innocent revelation hung in the air. Victor set down his fork. That won't happen here, he said quietly. I promise, Levi nodded solemnly. I know you're sick. You need us more than we need you. Victor stared. What makes you say I'm sick? Your medicine cabinet, the way you move sometimes, the papers you hide when we come in. Levi shrugged. People think kids don't notice things. The other boys looked uncomfortable but not surprised. They knew. Is that why you stayed? Victor asked, addressing them all. Pity? Caleb answered, his street-hardened eyes suddenly vulnerable. We stayed because you're the first person who didn't want something from us, even if it's just because you're dying. The brutal honesty broke something in the room. Victor laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised even him. "Well," he said, "at least we're being honest now." That night, for the first time, the mansion felt different. Not quite a home, but no longer just a house. Victor lay awake, listening to occasional footsteps and whispers, the unfamiliar sounds of life, disrupting his perfect solitude. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. The story broke faster than Victor had anticipated. "Terminal billionaire adopts 5 street urchins," screamed the headline on the New York Finance Tribune. By morning, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Ignore them," Victor instructed his household staff as he adjusted Levi's bow tie. All 5 boys stood uncomfortably in tailored suits that couldn't quite disguise their street-toughened bodies. "Why do we have to go to this thing again?" Noah asked, pulling at his collar. "Because," Victor said patiently, "the annual Children's Hospital benefit is important, and because people are talking about us," Caleb stated flatly. Victor met his eyes. "Yes, and I want them to see what I see." The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria glittered with Manhattan's elite. Conversations hushed momentarily as Victor entered with his entourage of children. Then the whispers began, hardly concealed behind manicured hands and crystal champagne flutes. Langston lost his mind. Terminal diagnosis does strange things. Publicity stunt before he kicks the bucket. Those animals will tear through his estate. Roland Baxter, Victor's chief rival and CEO of Baxter Global, approached with a predatory smile. "Victor, how charitable of you to bring your project tonight." Victor felt Caleb stiffen beside him. "They're my sons, Roland, not a project." Baxter's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Though one wonders if the Langston Ventures board shares your paternal enthusiasm, especially given your health concerns." "My health is my business." "Oh, but a public company's leadership is everyone's business." Baxter turned to the boys. "And what do you street entrepreneurs think of high finance? Found anything worth pocketing yet?" Before Victor could intervene, Caleb stepped forward. "Sir, I've been studying Mr. Langston's quarterly reports. Your company's debt-to-equity ratio seems concerning compared to industry standards." Silence fell around them. Baxter's face darkened. "Watch your tongue, boy. You don't belong here." "Neither does most of your portfolio's performance," Caleb replied coolly. A woman in diamonds gasped. Baxter's hand twitched as if he might strike Caleb. Victor moved between them. "My son has a talent for numbers," Victor said, emphasizing son. "Perhaps you should listen," Baxter sneered. "Your sons have a talent for manipulation. Everyone knows what's happening here. You're dying, Langston. These gutter rats have convinced you to hand over what you've built." Nathan lunged forward, only to be caught by his twin. "Don't talk about him like that." The room had gone silent. All eyes were on them. "I think," Victor said with deadly calm, "we'll be leaving early. Come, boys." As they walked through the parting crowd, little Levi suddenly stopped and turned to Baxter and the gathered elite. "You think we're using him because he's dying?" the small boy said clearly. "But you're the ones who left him alone when he got sick." The truth of it hung in the air like crystal. No one spoke as Victor guided his new family out of the ballroom. In the limousine, Victor expected anger, perhaps tears. Instead, the boys were quiet until Isaac finally asked, "Do you care what those people think?" Victor considered this. "I used to, very much." And now he looked at these 5 fierce, loyal children who had defended him, not his money. The realization struck him like lightning. "Now I care what you think. All of you." The boys exchanged glances, and a silent communication developed on the streets. Finally, Caleb spoke for them all. "Then we think it's us against them," he said simply. "And we're not losing." Victor Langston was not accustomed to failure. The humiliation at the charity gala had ignited something within him, determination to prove that his boys deserved respect, not scorn. "We're hosting a dinner party," he announced over breakfast 1 week later. "The most influential people in Manhattan will be here." The boys exchanged skeptical glances. "Why?" Isaac asked, his artistic hands nervously rearranging his silverware. "They made it clear they don't like us. Because," Victor explained, "in this world, respect is earned, sometimes by proving people wrong." The next 2 weeks transformed the mansion into a training ground. Victor hired the city's finest etiquette coach, a stern French woman named Madame Dubois, who marched into their lives with military precision. "Back straight, Levi. Knife on the right, Noah." "One does not reach, Nathan. One asks to pass the salt." The boys endured endless lessons on proper dining, conversation topics, and social niceties. They practiced introductions and memorized the backgrounds of expected guests. Victor had suits custom-tailored for each of them, watching with unexpected pride as they gradually transformed, at least on the outside. "This is stupid," Caleb muttered during their final rehearsal, adjusting his cufflinks. "They'll never accept us." "It's not about acceptance," Victor replied, surprising himself with the realization. "It's about dignity, about showing them you belong wherever you choose to be." The night of the dinner arrived. The mansion gleamed. Exquisite flower arrangements adorned every table. The world-renowned chef they'd hired had prepared a 7-course meal that would impress even the most discerning palates. 7 o'clock came, then 7:30. By 8, only 6 couples had arrived out of 30 invitations. Victor recognized the calculated insult immediately. "Perhaps the traffic," his housekeeper suggested, but her eyes held pity. The few who did attend made their disdain evident. Conversations halted when the boys approached. Questions were directed at Victor as if his sons were invisible. When Isaac accidentally knocked over a water glass, the snickers were barely concealed. The breaking point came during dessert. Evelyn Carver, wife of a prominent hedge fund manager, accidentally spilled red wine on Isaac's new suit. "Oh my," she said without a hint of remorse. "How clumsy of me." But then, fine fabrics are wasted on those unused to them. Victor saw the hurt flash across Isaac's face before the boy masked it with the practiced indifference of someone accustomed to cruelty. Before he could intervene, he overheard Carver's husband speaking to another guest. "Langston's little deathbed charity project is quite the spectacle, isn't it? Wonder how long it'll take these street rats to drain his accounts once he's gone." The room seemed to freeze. Victor looked around at the sneering faces, the barely disguised contempt. Then his eyes found his boys. 5 children trying so desperately to be what others wanted, to earn a place they shouldn't have had to fight for. Something inside Victor Langston, the ruthless businessman who had crushed competitors without remorse, broke and reformed into something stronger. He stood, tapping his glass for attention. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he said, his voice steady. "Your presence has been educational for my sons and me." Confused glances circulated the table. "You see, I invited you here thinking I needed your approval, that my boys needed it." Victor placed a hand on Levi's shoulder. "I was wrong. Tonight has shown me that some of the finest suits in Manhattan cover the poorest characters." Gasps rippled through the room. "This dinner is concluded," Victor announced. "Henry will show you out." After the stunned guests departed, the 6 Langstons sat in silence at the enormous dining table. "Did we fail?" Levi asked in a small voice. Victor looked at their dejected faces and felt a fierce protectiveness he'd never experienced before. "No," he said firmly. "They failed. They failed to see what I see." "What's that?" Noah asked. Victor's voice grew soft, but certain. 5 extraordinary boys, who survived extraordinary circumstances, who deserve extraordinary opportunities." He paused. "And we're going to create those opportunities ourselves." For the first time since entering his home, all 5 boys smiled at him simultaneously. Tiny miracle that meant more than any business deal he'd ever closed. The mansion transformed. Victor, who had always delegated home matters to his staff, found himself deeply involved in creating spaces for his new family. The formal sitting room became a comfortable gathering place with oversized couches. The rarely used kitchen expanded to accommodate cooking lessons that all 6 of them attempted with varying degrees of success. This is the third time we've set off the smoke alarm. Nathan laughed as they aired out the kitchen after a particularly ambitious attempt at lasagna. The fire department knows us by name now, Noah added, wiping sauce from his face. Even Victor joined in the laughter, a sound that was becoming more common in the house that had known only silence for years. As the weeks passed, Victor noticed each boy's distinct interests emerging more clearly. During a quiet afternoon in his study, he observed Caleb poring over financial reports. "You understand those?" Victor asked, genuinely surprised. Caleb nodded without looking up. "Numbers make sense. People don't." Victor arranged for a former colleague, a mathematical prodigy turned investment guru, to tutor Caleb. The boys' aptitudes stunned them both. The twins revealed their fascination with technology when Victor caught them dismantling and reassembling his spare laptop. "We can put it back," they exclaimed in unison. "I'm counting on it," Victor replied, then added, "There's an engineering lab in the East Wing. It's yours now." Isaac's artistic talent emerged through doodles that transformed scrap paper into works of art. Victor hired a renowned artist to mentor him, watching with pride as Isaac's confidence grew with each sketch. For Levi, the youngest, it was books, especially science and medicine. Victor found him one night surrounded by medical texts from the library. "You can read these?" Victor asked, picking up a complex anatomy book. "Most of it," Levi replied. "The body is like a machine. If you understand the parts, you can fix what's broken." Victor's eyebrow raised. "Is that so?" The boy nodded seriously. "Like you're broken, but maybe not forever." The innocent comment hit Victor hard. As his health deteriorated, the fatigue became more persistent, and the pain required stronger medication. He had begun preparations for the inevitable. His lawyers had solidified the adoption and updated his will, ensuring the boys would be cared for, but he had accepted his fate until now. That night, Victor made calls to specialists around the world. By morning, a team of tutors had been assembled, not just in academics, but in each boy's specific interests. The mansion hummed with new energy as learning spaces were created and schedules arranged. "Why are you doing all this?" Caleb asked one evening, finding Victor reviewing their educational plans despite obvious exhaustion. Victor considered the question. 3 months ago, he would have had no answer. Now he had 5. "Because time is precious," he said simply. "And I want to give you as much of mine as I can." What he didn't say, what he couldn't bring himself to admit, was how these 5 street-tough boys had awakened something he thought had died with his wife. Hope, purpose, the fragile belief that perhaps he had found something worth fighting for. Later that night, pain kept Victor awake. He wandered to the kitchen for water and medication, only to freeze at the sound of hushed voices from the library. At 3:00 a.m., all 5 boys should have been asleep. Silently, he approached the partially open door, prepared to scold them for breaking curfew. What he saw instead would change everything. Victor stood silently in the doorway, anger rising at the broken curfew. The library was dimly lit, but he could see all 5 boys hunched over the large oak table, surrounded by stacks of books and papers. Medical journals, financial reports, and complex diagrams covered every surface. He stepped forward, ready to reprimand them, when Levi's small voice stopped him. "The treatment protocol needs modification. His type of cancer responds better to this combination." The child pointed to a complex medical chart that Victor recognized from his own oncologist's office. "We'd need access to experimental treatments," Caleb replied, scribbling calculations. "That requires money." "Big money, which we can generate using the algorithm," Noah said, as Nathan nodded in agreement. "The market patterns are predictable if you zoom out far enough." Isaac was sketching something. Victor could see it was a detailed diagram of what appeared to be a medical device. "What is going on here?" Victor's voice cut through the room like a knife. 5 heads snapped up, faces frozen in guilt and fear. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Caleb slowly stood. "We know how to save you." Victor stared, certain he'd misheard. "What did you say?" Levi approached cautiously, clutching a folder. Your cancer. It's aggressive, but there's a path forward that your doctors haven't tried. Victor looked at the folder, then at each boy in turn. How could you possibly? We're not what people think we are, Caleb interrupted. None of us. One by one, they explained. Caleb had taught himself finance by reading discarded Wall Street journals, developing an almost supernatural ability with patterns and predictions. The twins had been fixing and reprogramming discarded electronics since they were 7. Isaac could reproduce anything he saw with perfect accuracy, including complex medical illustrations. And Levi, the youngest, had spent hours in hospital waiting rooms, reading medical texts while waiting for the free clinic to treat whatever ailments plagued them on the streets. We found each other because we were different, Caleb explained. Kids like us don't survive alone. Victor sank into a chair. So, you knew who I was? When I found you in that alley, we recognized you, Caleb admitted. Langston Ventures. Your photo was in the business section the day before. You planned this? Victor felt a crushing wave of disappointment. All of it was a calculation. Levi's small hand touched his. No, we didn't plan for you to find us. But when you did, the boy hesitated. When you did, we saw a chance, not just for shelter, but to do something important. Important? Victor echoed. Your money can fund research that would take decades otherwise, Nathan said. And you can give us the resources to develop our ideas, Noah added. Ideas that could help people like you. Isaac's voice was barely audible. Victor looked at the work spread before him. The complex calculations, the innovative approaches, the sheer brilliance that had been hidden behind 5 pairs of weary eyes. Why? He asked finally. Why try to save me? Why not just wait for the inheritance? The boys exchanged glances. Finally, Caleb spoke for them all. Because you're the first person who looked at us and saw something worth keeping. The simplicity of the answer broke something in Victor's chest. These children, these brilliant, calculating, wounded children, had been planning to save him while he had been planning to die. Show me, Victor said, wiping unexpected moisture from his eyes. Show me everything. As dawn broke over Manhattan, 6 figures remained hunched over the library table, their shadows merging into one as they plotted against death itself. The morning after their revelation, Victor called an emergency meeting with his medical team. The doctors listened with polite skepticism as he outlined the alternative treatment approach, carefully omitting that it had come from a child. They promised to look into it with the patronizing tone reserved for terminal patients grasping at straws. They won't help, Levi said when Victor returned home, frustration evident. They think you're desperate. I am desperate, Victor admitted, sinking into his chair. The pain had been worse lately, a constant reminder of his dwindling time. Then we do it ourselves, Caleb declared, his street-hardened confidence unwavering. We have the resources. Over the next week, Victor watched in amazement as his makeshift family transformed parts of the mansion into what they called Project Horizon. The East Wing became a research space where Levi and Isaac worked on treatment protocols. Victor made discreet arrangements to access experimental medications through his global connections. Meanwhile, Caleb and the twins developed a revolutionary market prediction algorithm. Combining the twins' programming skills with Caleb's uncanny financial instincts, Victor provided historical data from Langston Ventures, astounded by how quickly they identified patterns that had eluded his top analysts. For the first time since his diagnosis, Victor felt a dangerous emotion creeping in. Hope. It couldn't last. The first sign of trouble came via a call from Sylvia Thornton, chair of the Langston Ventures Board of Directors. Victor, the board is concerned, she began without preamble. These children, the adoption, your health shareholders are nervous. My personal life is not the board's concern, Victor replied coldly. It is when the CEO of a publicly traded company, worth billions, starts making erratic decisions while battling terminal illness. The second warning arrived the next day, when a social worker appeared for an anonymous welfare. Check on the boys. Her questions were pointed, her manner suspicious. Do you feel safe here? she asked Levi when she thought Victor couldn't hear. Safer than I've ever been, the boy answered with surprising poise. The social worker left, but Victor recognized the threat. Someone was watching. Someone with influence. The final confirmation came during a scheduled video meeting with his executive team. His screen briefly showed an incoming email not meant for his eyes, a message from his CFO to Roland Baxter discussing succession planning and acquisition opportunities. They're circling like vultures, Victor told the boys that evening. Baxter is planning a hostile takeover the moment I'm deemed incapacitated. Or dead, Caleb added bluntly. Victor nodded grimly. He's always wanted Langston Ventures. Now he thinks it's within reach. The twins exchanged looks. We checked our system, Nathan said. Someone's been trying to access the mansion security network and your private servers, Noah added. Sophisticated attempts. Victor's phone rang as head of security. Sir, there's been unusual activity around the residence's perimeter. Surveillance vehicles, not police. After ending the call, Victor faced his sons. Someone doesn't like what we're doing. They don't even know what we're doing, Isaac protested. Exactly. Victor's face darkened. But they suspect something. My erratic behavior threatens their plans. That night, Victor convened a family council in the secured library. The 5 boys listened intently as he outlined the gathering threats. We're fighting on multiple fronts now, he explained. First, my health, which is the central battle. Second, corporate governance. They'll try to remove me as CEO, claiming I'm mentally unfit. Third, the adoption itself. They'll challenge my capacity as a guardian. And fourth, Caleb continued, the algorithm. If they knew what we're developing. Victor nodded. It could revolutionize market prediction, worth billions. They'd steal it, the twins said simultaneously. Or destroy it, Isaac added. Levi, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. We need to divide to conquer. All eyes turned to the youngest boy. What do you mean? Victor asked. You've taught us about strategy, Levi explained. When outnumbered, create confusion among your enemies. A slow smile spread across Victor's face. Divide their attention. Make them fight each other. Caleb caught on, his street-smart mind racing. The plan took shape as the night progressed. The 6 Langstons, a family forged in desperation but now bound by something stronger, mapped out their defense. Victor would throw himself into a highly public charitable initiative, drawing attention away from their private work. Simultaneously, through carefully planted information, they would set Baxter against other potential corporate raiders, creating confusion in the predatory ranks. Most importantly, they would accelerate Project Horizon. Levi's experimental treatment would begin immediately, while Caleb and the twins would deploy early versions of their algorithm to generate the capital needed for more extensive research. It's dangerous, Victor cautioned. For all of us, this is your last chance to walk away. I can arrange safe, comfortable lives for you, regardless of what happens to me. The boys exchanged looks, that silent communication that still sometimes excluded him. Then, one by one, they placed their hands on the table. Family doesn't walk away, Caleb said simply. Victor placed his hand atop theirs, feeling the warmth of their small, strong fingers beneath his palm. These children, who had survived abandonment, poverty, and the merciless streets of New York, had chosen him, a dying man who had never understood the true value of connection until now. Then we fight, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. None of them noticed the tiny red light blinking on Victor's private phone, indicating that someone had been listening to every word. Morning came with a new sense of purpose. Victor's mansion, once a showcase of wealth but devoid of life, had transformed into a hub of secretive activity. The basement level, previously used only for storage and mechanical systems, became the nerve center of what they now officially called Project Horizon. Security Protocol Alpha engaged, Noah announced, his fingers flying across a keyboard. Mansion systems are isolated from external networks. Cellular dampening fields active, Nathan added. No signals in or out except through our secured channels. Victor watched with a mixture of pride and amazement. The twins had created a technological fortress around the mansion in just 3 days, using components ordered through various shell companies to avoid detection. Physical security is upgraded too, Caleb reported. I vetted and replaced half the security team with people who have no connections to your corporate structure. And the treatment? Victor asked, turning to Levi and Isaac. Levi spread out detailed medical charts. Phase 1 begins today. The modified protocol attacks the cancer cells while preserving immune function. He looked up with eyes too, knowing for his years. It will make you feel worse before you feel better. I trust you, Victor said simply. Isaac had converted a rarely used sunroom into a treatment space. Natural light flooded the room where a medical bed now stood, surrounded by equipment that looked both familiar and strangely modified. The delivery system is customized, Isaac explained, pointing to his intricate diagrams. Standard protocols waste medication on healthy tissue. This targets only the affected areas. Victor reclined on the bed, rolling up his sleeve for the first infusion. As Levi prepared the medication with precision that would impress any nurse, Victor reflected on the absurdity of placing his life in the hands of a child who should be playing with toys instead of calibrating cancer treatments. Ready? Levi asked. Victor nodded, feeling the cool liquid enter his veins. While I'm undergoing treatment, Caleb will represent me at the office. The board can't object to me mentoring my son in the business. The treatment was brutal. For the next 3 days, Victor drifted in and out of consciousness, his body at war with both the cancer and the aggressive therapy. The boys took shifts at his bedside, monitoring his vitals and adjusting medications. Through the fog of pain and medication, Victor heard their voices sometimes arguing over treatment parameters, sometimes reading financial reports aloud, sometimes simply talking to him about their hopes and fears. On the 4th day, Victor awoke to find all 5 boys asleep in various uncomfortable positions around his room. Despite his weakness, he smiled. When had these street-hardened children become the center of his world? As the first phase of treatment concluded, the financial aspect of Project Horizon accelerated. Caleb had been making daily appearances at Langston Ventures, absorbing information like a sponge, while discreetly gathering intelligence on Baxter's takeover plans. He's approaching key shareholders, Caleb reported during their evening strategy session, offering premium buyouts conditional on board reorganization. Translation: Get rid of me, Victor said, still weak but clear-headed. Meanwhile, the AI algorithm is exceeding expectations, Nathan announced proudly. We've generated an 18% return on the test portfolio in just 10 days. Noah pulled up complex graphs on their secure server. The pattern detection is working. We can see market shifts before they happen. How long until we can deploy at full scale? Victor asked. 2 weeks, the twins said in unison, maybe less. That night, as Victor reviewed their progress from his bed, he heard a soft knock. Margaret Sullivan, his executive assistant of 20 years, entered carrying files. The documents you requested, sir, she said, placing them beside him. Her eyes lingered on the medical equipment surrounding his bed. The board is asking questions. Baxter is making moves. Let him, Victor replied. Everything is proceeding as planned. Margaret hesitated. Is it true these children they're actually helping with your treatment? Victor studied the woman who had been his most trusted employee for 2 decades. They're more than helping, Margaret. They're saving my life. Her expression remained unreadable. I hope you know what you're doing, Victor. After she left, an uneasy feeling lingered. Victor reached for his secure phone to text Caleb, only to find it missing from his bedside table. The feeling of unease deepened into alarm. Victor's missing phone triggered an immediate security protocol. The twins activated tracking systems while Caleb interviewed each staff member who had access to the treatment room. Nothing, Caleb reported, frustration evident in his voice. The tracking shows it's still in the mansion, but we've searched everywhere. Could it be malfunctioning? Victor asked, still weak from his treatment. Our tech doesn't malfunction, Nathan stated with absolute confidence. The answer came at dawn. Isaac, who had been monitoring the mansion's modified security cameras, burst into Victor's room. "You need to see this," he said, placing a tablet in Victor's hands. The footage showed Margaret Sullivan entering Victor's room while he slept. She took his phone, photographed documents related to Project Horizon, and replaced everything carefully before leaving. "When was this?" Victor asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Last night," Isaac answered. "After her visit." There's more," Levi added, stepping forward. "The secure server shows someone accessed our treatment protocols from inside the mansion." Victor closed his eyes briefly. 20 years of loyalty, or so he had thought. Find her now. They discovered Margaret in her office at Langston Ventures, calmly working as if nothing had happened. When security escorted her to a private conference room where Victor waited, her composure never faltered. "Why?" Victor asked simply. Margaret's professional mask finally cracked, revealing bitter resentment. 23 years, Victor. I've given you 23 years of my life, and I've compensated you generously."
"Money?"
She laughed harshly. "I didn't want just money. I wanted recognition, partnership, a place at your side." Her voice hardened. "Then you bring in these street urchins, make them your heirs. Give them access to everything I worked decades for." The betrayal cut deep, but Victor kept his voice steady. "Who are you working with? Baxter?" She smiled coldly. "Roland values loyalty and talent. He's promised me the executive vice presidency after the acquisition. And your treatment information, your personal medical details insurance?" She replied, "Proof of your mental instability. A dying billionaire trusts street children with experimental medical treatments. The board will remove you by the end of the week." Victor leaned forward. "You've made a serious miscalculation, Margaret. These street children are more brilliant and loyal than you could comprehend." Her confidence wavered slightly. "It's too late. Roland has everything he needs. Your little family experiment is over." "We'll see," Victor replied, signaling for security. "Until then, your employment type is terminated. A severance package will follow, contingent on non-disclosure agreements." After she was escorted out, Victor returned home to find the boys implementing containment protocols. The twins had already neutralized the security breach, while Caleb assessed the financial damage. "She sent Roland everything," Caleb reported grimly. "The treatment protocols, early algorithm designs, our security setup." "How bad?" Victor asked. "Bad enough," Levi said. "The treatment timeline is compromised."
"We need to accelerate everything."
Victor looked at their worried faces, children who should be playing sports or video games, not fighting corporate espionage and terminal illness. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was he being selfish, dragging them into his battles? As if reading his thoughts, Isaac spoke up. "Don't even think about giving up. We knew the risks," Caleb added firmly. "And we faced worse odds on the streets," Nathan said. Noah nodded in agreement. "Besides, she made a critical error." "What's that?" Victor asked. Levi smiled slightly. "She stole incomplete data. We've been working on decoy protocols while developing the real treatment separately." For the first time since discovering the betrayal, Victor felt a glimmer of hope return. These extraordinary children continued to surprise him. "Then we counterattack," he declared. Immediately, the morning after Margaret's betrayal, Victor Langston collapsed. The experimental treatment, combined with stress and his already weakened state, proved too much. Paramedics were called, but the boys insisted on a private medical facility rather than a public hospital, one where they could maintain security and continue their modified protocols. "Sir, I strongly advise against this." Victor's personal physician argued as he was settled into a private wing of an exclusive medical center. "These unconventional treatments are working," Levi interrupted, holding up Victor's latest blood work. "Cancer markers down 18% in 10 days. The doctor stared at the small boy in disbelief. "That's impossible." "Improbable," Levi corrected. "Not impossible." With Victor temporarily incapacitated, the boys implemented their contingency plan. Caleb assumed leadership, addressing the crisis with a maturity far beyond his 15 years. "We need to split responsibilities," he told his brothers in Victor's hospital room. "I'll handle Langston Ventures and keep Baxter at bay. Nathan and Noah secure our digital infrastructure. Isaac, manage public perception. Levi, focus entirely on Victor's treatment." Each boy threw himself into his designated role. Caleb, dressed in a custom-tailored suit that couldn't quite hide his street origins, marched into Langston Ventures' executive floor. The board members, who had been plotting Victor's removal, found themselves facing a teenager with an uncanny grasp of their business and the legal protections Victor had put in place. "Mr. Langston has granted me limited power of attorney during his treatment," Caleb announced, sliding impressive legal documents across the table. "Any attempt to remove him as CEO will trigger immediate litigation and a freeze on all executive stock options." Meanwhile, the twins worked around the clock to solidify their digital defenses while simultaneously refining the market prediction algorithm. They discovered that Margaret's betrayal had an unexpected silver lining. Baxter's technical team was now focused on deciphering the decoy algorithm, wasting valuable resources. Isaac, with his artistic talents, created a carefully crafted public narrative. Working with Victor's PR team, he released strategic updates about Victor's routine treatment and the ongoing mentorship of his remarkable adopted sons. Photographs showing the boys visiting children's shelters and participating in community outreach generated a wave of positive coverage that countered Baxter's whisper campaign about Victor's competency. Levi barely left Victor's side. When not adjusting treatment protocols, he read medical journals and consulted discreetly with specialists around the world who had been carefully vetted and generously compensated for their confidentiality. The boy's extraordinary medical intuition, combined with boundless determination, began yielding results even the skeptical medical staff couldn't ignore. 1 week into the hospitalization, Victor opened his eyes to find all 5 boys asleep in his room, surrounded by laptops, papers, and half-eaten meals. Despite his weakness, he smiled. This was what family looked like: messy, devoted, unrelenting in the face of challenges. "Progress report," he whispered hoarsely. Levi jerked awake instantly. "Victor, your markers are down 30% now. The modified protocol is working better than expected." The others stirred, relief visible on their exhausted faces. "And Baxter?" Victor asked. Caleb stepped forward. "Contained for now. He's making moves, but we've countered each one. The board is split." "The algorithm?" The twins exchanged proud glances. "Fully operational," Nathan announced. "We've already generated enough capital to fund your treatment for years if necessary." "And public opinion?" Victor turned to Isaac. "Shifting in our favor," Isaac reported. "Your community initiatives are gaining traction. People are questioning Baxter's motives." Victor studied their faces, these children, who had become his reason to fight, his legacy, his family. "You've done exceptionally well, better than I could have." "We learned from the best," Caleb replied simply. As Victor began his slow recovery, a new determination took hold. This was no longer just about surviving his illness or protecting his company. This was about proving that family, even one forged in unlikely circumstances, could withstand any storm. 2 weeks after Victor's hospitalization, as he grew stronger daily, financial markets around the world began to shudder. What started as minor fluctuations quickly escalated into dramatic downturns across multiple sectors. "It's happening exactly as the algorithm predicted," Caleb explained, spreading charts across Victor's bed in the private medical suite. "A perfect storm of overvalued tech stocks, energy sector vulnerabilities, and banking instability." Victor studied the data, impressed by the precision of the twins' predictive model. "And our positions?" "Protected," Noah confirmed. "We moved assets to safety 72 hours ago." "Baxter?" Victor asked. Nathan grimaced. "Exposed massively. He's leveraged to the hilt in exactly the wrong sectors." Wall Street was in chaos. Financial networks broadcast scenes of panic as investors watched fortunes evaporate. The Langston Ventures offices became an island of eerie calm amid the storm. With Caleb directing operations from Victor's office with preternatural confidence, a juvenile wizard of Wall Street, One financial program called him as cameras captured the teenager, conferring with seasoned executives 3 times his age. By the third day of market turmoil, Victor was strong enough to make brief appearances at the office, carefully stage-managed by Isaac to project strength, while not overtly taxing his recovering body. Baxter Global is requesting an emergency meeting, his new assistant informed him. Mr. Baxter, specifically. Victor exchanged glances with Caleb. Schedule it for tomorrow. Here, not their offices. Roland Baxter arrived with none of his usual bravado. His custom suit couldn't hide the strain of sleepless nights and mounting losses. Behind him followed 3 other executives who had once mocked Victor's adopted family, all looking equally desperate. Victor, Baxter began, attempting to sound casual. This market situation is unprecedented. Is it? Victor replied mildly. Our analysts predicted this correction weeks ago. Baxter flinched at the word correction, a massive understatement for what was effectively a crash that decimated his company. We need to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement, Baxter continued. An emergency capital infusion. A partnership, perhaps. Partnership? Caleb echoed incredulously. After you attempted a hostile takeover? After you used stolen information? Baxter's face darkened at being addressed by a teenager, but desperation kept his tone civil. Business is business. We've all made aggressive moves at times. Victor leaned forward. Let me understand. You want me to save the company of the man who tried to destroy mine? Who used my illness as leverage? Who called my sons street rats? The market won't recover for months. One of the other executives interjected desperately. By then we'll be insolvent. Thousands of jobs lost. Retirement funds wiped out. Victor turned to Caleb. What does our algorithm predict for companies that implement proper risk management and ethical governance? Caleb didn't miss a beat. Recovery within 8 weeks. Potential for significant growth in the right sectors by quarter's end. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Victor stood. Gentlemen, I'll consider assistance on one condition. Name it, Baxter said quickly. Victor smiled. My sons will explain the terms. I suggest you listen carefully. As Victor stepped out to take a scheduled medication that Levi insisted couldn't be delayed, he heard Caleb begin outlining conditions that would reshape Manhattan's financial landscape and the lives of countless vulnerable young people throughout the city. The irony wasn't lost on Victor. The Charity K Street children were now determining the fate of the very elites who had mocked them, and they were doing it not with vengeance but with vision. The terms were laid out with precision that impressed even Victor. Caleb, with support from his brothers, had crafted conditions that went far beyond simple financial bailouts. 50% of board seats at each rescued company must be allocated to individuals with experience in social services or education. Caleb explained to the assembled executives the following day. A minimum of 30% of annual profits will fund programs for at-risk youth. Impossible, Baxter sputtered. Our shareholders would never. Your shareholders are currently losing everything, Nathan interrupted flatly. This offers them recovery, Noah continued. Each company will establish apprenticeship programs offering pathways to employment for youth from disadvantaged backgrounds and full college scholarships for qualified applicants. Isaac added, plus, funding for medical research focused on treatments for traditionally underfunded diseases affecting vulnerable populations. The executives looked stunned at the comprehensive demands coming from children they had once dismissed. Victor watched with quiet pride as his sons conducted themselves with the maturity and vision that put the so-called business leaders to shame. You have 24 hours to decide, Caleb concluded. After that, our offer expires. When the executives departed, Victor gathered his family in his private office. You realize what you're doing? He asked them. You're not just saving companies. You're changing systems that have existed for generations. Systems that failed us, Caleb replied simply, and thousands like us. Later that evening, as they returned to the mansion, Victor found Levi sitting alone in the library, unusually quiet. What's troubling you? Victor asked gently. Levi looked up from the medical journal he'd been studying. These people were cruel to us. They laughed at us, called us names. Yes, Victor agreed. They did. And now we have the power to watch them fail, to let them experience what it's like to have nothing. The small boy's voice held no vindictiveness, only a genuine ethical query. Wouldn't that be justice? Victor sat beside him. Perhaps, but is justice what we're seeking? The other boys had gathered in the doorway, listening. What are we seeking then? Isaac asked. Victor looked at each of them, these extraordinary children, who had already experienced more hardship than most adults. That's the real question, isn't it? Revenge is easy. Transformation is harder. We could do both, Nathan suggested. Help them, but make it hurt. We could, Victor agreed. The question is, who would that make us? A heavy silence fell. Finally, Caleb spoke from the doorway. On the streets, we had a choice every day. Become what hurt us or become something better. He stepped into the room. I vote we choose better. One by one, the others nodded in agreement. The next morning, the executives returned with signed agreements accepting all conditions. As papers were exchanged, Baxter approached Victor privately. I don't understand, he admitted. You could have destroyed us. After what I tried to do to you, what I said about these children, why help us at all? Victor glanced across the room where his sons were reviewing documents with the legal team. I had excellent teachers, he replied simply. As Baxter left, thoroughly humbled, Victor felt a strange lightness. His body was still fighting cancer, still vulnerable, but his spirit had never been stronger. That night, the Langston family celebrated with pizza in Victor's study, a far cry from the formal dinners of his previous life. To the future? Victor toasted with his glass of sparkling water, clinking it against the boys' sodas. To family, Levi corrected with a smile. The following weeks brought remarkable transformations. The financial crisis began stabilizing exactly as the algorithm had predicted. Langston Ventures not only weathered the storm, but emerged stronger, guiding other companies toward recovery through the conditional partnerships Caleb had orchestrated. Manhattan's elite watched in fascination as the terms of these agreements took effect. Board meetings that once focused solely on profit margins now include discussions of apprenticeship programs and scholarship initiatives. Corporate offices open their doors to young people from backgrounds similar to the Langston boys. It's working better than we anticipated, Caleb reported during their weekly family meeting. The dining room table was covered with reports showing the impact of their initiatives. Companies are finding that these programs improve their bottom line through innovation and community goodwill. And the medical research funding is yielding results? Levi added excitedly. 3 new clinical trials have been approved based on our model. Most remarkably, Victor's health continued to improve. The experimental treatment protocol had reduced his cancer markers by over 60%. His doctors, initially skeptical, now documented every aspect of his case for medical journals. They're calling it the Langston Protocol, Levi said proudly. It could help thousands of patients with similar conditions. Margaret Sullivan made an unexpected return one afternoon, requesting to see Victor. She stood awkwardly in his office, a shadow of her former confident self. I made a terrible mistake, she admitted. Baxter promised everything, then abandoned me when his company began failing. Victor studied her, remembering 20 years of loyal service before her betrayal. What do you want, Margaret? A chance to make amends? She replied softly. Any position. I'll start at the bottom if necessary. Victor turned to Caleb, who had been silently observing. What do you think? Caleb considered carefully before answering. Everyone deserves a second chance, but trust must be earned. Victor nodded. There's a position coordinating our new youth programs. It's demanding work with troubled teenagers, nothing like your previous role. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. Then she nodded. I accept. Thank you. As spring arrived in Manhattan, the Langston family found themselves at the center of a quiet revolution. Financial publications that had once mocked Langston's charity case now analyzed the innovative approaches his remarkably gifted sons were bringing to business and philanthropy. The tide had turned, not through force, but through vision and perseverance. 1 year to the day after Victor Langston received his terminal diagnosis, he stood at the podium of the newly inaugurated Langston Foundation for Young Innovators. The grand building, once a neglected warehouse in a struggling neighborhood, now gleamed with innovation labs, teaching spaces, and housing for youth in transition. When I received my diagnosis 12 months ago, Victor began, his voice strong despite the emotion underlying it, I believed I was facing an ending. Instead, I found a beginning. The audience, a remarkable mix of business leaders, medical professionals, and young people from all backgrounds, listened in rapt attention. In the front row sat 5 boys in matching navy suits, watching with pride as the man they had saved told their story. Medical science will tell you my recovery was due to an innovative treatment protocol, Victor continued. Financial analysts will attribute Langston Ventures' remarkable growth to predictive algorithms and strategic partnerships. Both are correct, but incomplete. He paused, looking directly at his sons. What truly saved me, what transformed everything, was finding a family in the most unexpected place 5 extraordinary young men who saw beyond my wealth to my emptiness, beyond my power to my vulnerability. The Foundation's inaugural ceremony marked the culmination of their remarkable journey. The Langston Protocol, as Levi's cancer treatment became known, was now helping patients worldwide. The twins' algorithm had revolutionized market forecasting while funding social initiatives through its profits. Isaac's artistic vision had shaped the Foundation's design, creating spaces where creativity could flourish regardless of background. Caleb had become Victor's true partner in business, bringing fresh perspectives that changed corporate culture from within. After the ceremony, as guests mingled in the Foundation's central atrium, Margaret Sullivan approached with a group of teenagers, her first cohort from the street outreach program she now led. They have something to show you, she said softly to Victor and the boys. One girl stepped forward nervously. We developed this app to help kids find safe places and services. She demonstrated the program on her tablet. It works offline too, for those without reliable connections. Victor watched as his sons immediately engaged with the teens, offering suggestions and encouragement with the natural ease of those who truly understood. There was no condescension, no distance, only connection between young people who recognized each other's struggles and strengths. Later that evening, in the privacy of their home, the Langston family gathered in the library where it had all begun 1 year ago. The board approved your nomination unanimously, Victor told Caleb. You'll be the youngest executive director in the Foundation's history. Are you sure? Caleb asked. People will talk. Victor smiled. Let them. The results will speak for themselves. Levi approached with Victor's latest medical results. Full remission, he announced proudly. Officially confirmed. So what now? Isaac asked. We've done everything we planned. Not everything, Victor replied thoughtfully. There are other children out there like you. Other possibilities waiting to be discovered. A new project? The twins asked simultaneously, eyes lighting up. Victor looked around at these extraordinary boys who had entered his life when he thought it was ending, who had taught him that true legacy wasn't measured in buildings or bank accounts, but in lives transformed. No, he said with a smile. A new chapter.